Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the North Carolina Business Podcast. Here we talk with the owners about their products and services that they offer in their business, and we learn about their story. We find out about their life's journey and what was it that inspired them to become entrepreneurs. So grab a glass of iced tea or your beverage of choice and join us in a nice conversation to get to know another great North Carolina business owner. Hello and welcome to another episode of the North Carolina Business Podcast. I'm honored to have Kelly Sroka with us in North Carolina, and she's going to talk with us now and explain to us this very interesting work that she does. Kelly, if you don't mind, I'll just open it up to you to kind of give us a general background on what you do, on your work, please. Thank you.
I am a spiritual guide, and I help people who are in places where they are maybe in transition, they're in a place where their life where they're not sure what path they want to be on, people looking for a way to bring more of the sacred and the spiritual into their lives, but it seems overwhelming. And so I break it down into different ways that a person can bring spirituality into their lives and connect it to their productivity, and it be an easy process, it not be overwhelming. And the things that I use are mainly tarot readings, astrology readings, and then I combine some of that with using crystals and balancing chakras, and working with the moon. And so those are some of the ways that I do that and help people bring that spirituality into their lives.
How nice. It sounds so interesting. Can you kind of walk us through the basic idea behind the tarot readings and the astrology readings and how that can affect a person or how that works?
Yeah, so many times, and what I can kind of give you a background with me and how I came to this, and this I think is, what I found is how a lot of people come to spirituality. Several years ago, I started having really bad panic attacks and just overwhelming anxiety, and I just couldn't. All the things that I was doing in my normal life, I just couldn't do anymore, and it was. I did all the normal things. I grew up in, a Protestant church, later became Catholic. And so I did kind of all the normal things that people say you should do. If you feel anxious, pray. If you feel anxious, meditate. And if you have anxiety, take these drugs. And all of those things kind of worked, but nothing specifically worked on its own. And so I realized quickly that if I were going to work through all of this anxiety and be able to have a normal life again, I was going to have to look at different paths, at different ways of bringing spirituality and healing into my life. And so I started looking at, I started doing a lot of meditation along with the counseling and with some prescription drugs, and doing meditating kind of led me into mindfulness, which led me into shamanism, which led me into crystals and just kind of that path along the way. And so I was really looking at what worked for me. And one day I was in the bookstore and found a tarot deck. And I knew about tarot. I knew, I had seen tarot cards. I had actually owned a tarot deck a long time ago and just didn't feel called to it at the time. But then for some reason, I just felt like this was something that I needed in my life. And I took the tarot deck out, and a tarot deck is made up of 78 cards, and it is based on an old Italian card game. And the images and stories from that old card game has just come through the ages. And it's now used for divinatory purposes. And so when I found it, I was an English teacher. I love symbolism and imagery, and the symbolism and the imagery on the cards just really spoke to me, and how I could, really focus on a question and lay out the cards, and they would tell me what I really needed to know. And as I did more and more readings and started doing readings for other people, I just found out how accurate the cards were, and they would just speak to me and speak to the other people in a way that I had not experienced before. And so that's really where my passion grew, and I started doing readings just free readings for people, just to really get into that space and to really find out what tarot can do. And at that point, I just knew that this was something that could help other people. And so I do professional readings now. And what happens is a client contacts me. I have several readings on my website. And so the client contacts me, and we usually do it by video. And sometimes we can do it by video, email if necessary. And we can also do it by Zoom chat. And so I do it all those different ways. But for a typical reading, the client will ask me a question. I will lay out maybe 3 to 5 cards, look at what the story is telling, and then give the message to that person. And the great thing about tarot is it really doesn't give you like a yes or no answer. It will give you a yes but, or a yes and or a no but. And so it really gives you, not at this time, but maybe this is what you need to do. And so it really gives you action steps, and which I think is is one of the greatest things about it, is when you have a question, you're not sure what to do, it doesn't just say, no, that's not a good idea. The tarot cards will say, no, that's not a good idea, but this is what you can do instead, or this is what you need to work on to make that happen. And so that's how I find tarot, and how I think that it helps other people.
That's interesting. When I was doing research for this interview, I found some interesting information. Like there was a let me see, Waite. His name is Arthur Edward Waite. He was one of the authors of a deck of tarot cards, and he was a Christian mystic. I mean, among other things, and I also saw that there was a lot of Christian imagery in the tarot deck, and then later on it was kind of toned down. There was a card that was called the Pope, but then it was later on called the Hierophant, and the Papist card became the High Priestess card. So it seems like there's, in spirituality and in general, it's not that it is so different from other ways of being spiritual. It seems like it's an additional tool to a person who is spiritual. Is that kind of how you see it? I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
kind of a
definitely
new area for me.
Yes, when the tarot cards were first came out, it was the 1400s in Italy, and it was just a card game that people played, kind of like our playing cards. But along with the suits and the court cards, there were also trump cards, which had the scenes like you're talking about, that had the Pope and the Papist, and there's one that's a tower, there's one that's a devil, there's one that is the Hierophant, the magician. So they had these scenes, and they were drawn from Christianity, because that was very prevalent there. And so some of it was reverence for Christianity, some of it was kind of mocking, or not mocking, but showing dissatisfaction with things that people may have seen in the church that they thought that maybe wasn't fair. So it did really grow out of that. And a lot of the very wealthy families had decks made especially for them. And there's actually one that's a very famous deck, and you can still see it there. It's still around, and it's still in a museum. I'm not sure where, But you can see it if you go online and search historical tarot decks. You can find the ones that have come through the ages. And then once mass production started and people were able to get the decks just very easily without them having them drawn by an artist, then the decks started to spread, and they spread out of Italy into the rest of Europe, into America. And so over the years, it spread mainly as a card game. But then in the 17 and 1800s, when occult groups started popping up and kind of looking at alternative ways of spirituality, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, things like that, and they saw that the tarot has so much deep symbolism in it, and the images were so full of symbols and meaning. And so several groups and individuals wrote about tarot and how it could be used as in divinatory ways. And so Arthur Edward Waite was one of those people. He was in one of the groups with Pamela Coleman Smith, who was she was the one who was the artist. So they got together and decided to kind of not normalize, but make kind of a standard tarot deck. And so they took the 78 cards, and he wrote the meanings and she did the pictures, and then it became known, and it was published, it became known as the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And so that's kind of the standard. And when you start out in tarot, you usually start out with one of the Rider-Waite-Smith decks. And then there's now, hundreds and thousands of different decks. But most of them have that same, and a tarot deck has to have the 78 cards, and it has a special, set of cards. And so the decks that you'll get will all have the 78 cards, and they'll have the major arcana cards, which are kind of the images and symbols that were on the trump cards in the old playing card games. And then there's the suits, and then there's the court cards. And so you have the 4 suits and the 4 suits in the tarot cards, and they'll differ a little bit, but in the original, or in the Rider-Waite system, it is wands and swords and cups and pentacles. And then there's the court cards, which are page, knight, king, and queen, and they're all in the suits as well. So that's the makeup of the 78 cards. So, and it, there is a lot of, if you study the cards, there is a lot of spirituality in it, and a lot of Christian symbolism, and a lot of symbolism from the Kabbalah, and there's a lot of astrological symbolism. And so it seems like it's just kind of, a mismatch, and you can kind of take out what you want. And as I started studying different paths of spirituality, I really did start seeing a lot of things that ran through, any kind of spirituality, and, Buddhism, Confucianism, meditation, mindfulness, they all have very similar goals, and they're different in ways, but there are lots of similarities. And so I think that there can be more than one path. And so I want to be able to bring that to people and say, there is more than one way, and if this doesn't resonate with you, this is something else that can resonate with you. So there definitely is that spirituality. And even being Catholic, I can see just in the Catholic Church how many things are based on pagan traditions. And so it's like, well, we just need to be open to all, and just take in what works for you, and what doesn't work for you, just kind of put it aside.
Definitely. I think we all kind of see different paths in our lives. We may have grown up in a certain way, and then as we get older, we see different people from different paths. And I personally think it's very enriching to try to understand different ways of living, different ways of spirituality. I think it's very enriching. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how your interest in this and it helped you personally? And then what was the step or what was the process about turning it into a business for you? How did that work?
Um, I really, as I was, healing, doing all the kind of regular things to, healing during the healing process of, getting my anxiety under control and things like that. Finding what worked for me and then wanting to share it with other people and knowing that there were other people that suffered from anxiety or suffered from panic attacks, and just knowing that this was so helpful for me that I really wanted to share it and just really wanted to let people know that it was okay to feel this way, and it's okay to find other ways to other things to include in your life, that that it's okay, and that if something doesn't seem to be working for you, then it's okay to bring other things in. And that was really what kind of led me to that. And also just being in a place where a few years ago, when my oldest went off to college, it was really hard for me because I homeschooled my kids. They were home all the time. We did stuff as a family. My husband is self-employed, and so his schedule, he was always pretty flexible with his schedule. So we spent a lot of time together. And when he went off to college, I started just not knowing who I was anymore, because that's all I ever wanted to be, was a wife and a mother and raise my children. And I just never thought that I would get to a place where they didn't need me anymore. And, they were living their own lives. And so it was really hard. And so this was one of the things that really helped me see that there were other paths and other things to do, and that I could use all the things that I had learned up to that point to give to other people now. And it wasn't, my kids didn't need me as much anymore, but there were other people that I felt like that could benefit from what I had been going through. And so that's when I kind of decided to do it as a business.
That's nice. And like you said, you homeschool, you have homeschooled your children. Do you still have, do you still homeschool? Do you still have children in school?
I have
Okay.
one, my youngest son is 17, so he'll be finishing up soon. And,
Wow.
but my other two kids, my oldest is 21 and he's in the Army. And my middle child, my daughter, she is in community college. She's still living at home right now, but she'll be
Nice.
moving out in the next, probably in this next year. So I only have one left.
Right.
So, mhm.
I know that my children are a little bit younger than yours. My oldest is 16, and I already think of that, about when he's older and when he wants to move out and when they all want to move out. And,
Mhm.
it's depressing thinking about that. I'm not looking forward to that. That's why I appreciate every moment and just enjoy every moment that I do have them here, in my little nest.
I know.
We're
Well,
all together.
that was one of the things that I think that got me through it, was that I knew that I had spent all that time with them, and that, we had been together almost almost their entire lives. And so just knowing that, and knowing I didn't miss any of it, when you're still incredibly sad when they left, but just knowing that I didn't miss it helped a lot. And so,
Yes, yes. I mean, you've given them that wonderful base for them to, like they say, it's when our kids are free and they're, comfortable in their lives and they're carrying on with their lives, and that is, kind of a tribute to their home life,
mhm,
which
yes.
is nice. But still, the but still they're not at home.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
hard. Hmm.
Yes, yes. So tell me, what do you like to do outside of your business and outside of being a homeschool mom?
Um, I like photography, and so I do that a lot. We right now we live in Madison, North Carolina, which is we're about 45 minutes north of Greensboro, and so we have a little farm. And as the kids were growing up, we had horses and chickens and dogs and cats and all that. So we did that, and that was really fun. But now that they're all gone, none of us really ride anymore. So we're downsizing and really thinking about what we want to do. And my husband and I really like to be outdoors, and we like to hike. And so we're thinking about moving to the mountains of North Carolina, in that area, and so that we can, because he likes photography, and that's something that we like to do together, and we like to hike. And so we're hoping that we can do more of that, as our responsibilities kind of decline at our home. And so I love to read. So I spend a lot of time just sitting on my porch with a good book and reading. I like to cook. And so those are the things that I really like to do, besides when I'm not businessing.
Yes, exactly. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, North Carolina, that's what I love about North Carolina. It's, we have the beach, we have the Piedmont area that's, you can go to the mountains or go to the beach, and then the
Mhm.
mountains are so beautiful. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. They're
Yes,
gorgeous.
they are. My son went actually to college for a year, and he was near Asheville, and so we spent a lot of time in that area, and it's just beautiful. And so I'm hoping that we can, as we get closer to the retirement and things like that, that we can spend it there. So.
How nice. That's great. That's great. Where do you see your business in, 5 or 10 years from now? Where do you want to go with it? Mhm.
I've started kind of branching out, along with doing just tarot readings. I've started offering classes, and so I have a class that's going to be coming out in July, and it's about using the moon, working with the moon cycles, and setting intentions with the moon cycle, and so that you can get more done. And so it's a lot of that, because when I started doing a lot of more spirituality, it seemed very overwhelming. It seemed like you had to do all of these things, work with the moon, be outside, have a huge crystal collection, and have incense burning all the time, and a meditation room. And it just seemed very overwhelming. And so when I started doing it, I really just took it, a step at a time. I just said, okay, well, I can't do all of that. So let me see what one little thing that I can do that will help me today. And then, I can add on to that. And one of the first things that I started doing was working with the moon and learning about the moon cycles and how it affects you. And I think as women, we kind of feel that anyway, because we have those internal cycles. But then, really looking at what is affecting it. How do I feel at this certain time of the month, and how do I feel at this certain time of the month, and when is it easier for me to get things done, and when is it not easy for me to get things done. And so really paying attention to that really helped me in a spiritual sense to feel closer to the earth and to closer to nature. But it also helped me to really be more productive, because I could look at a calendar and say, okay, I know these days, this is going to be a day where I know that I can get a lot done. So I've got my to-do list, and here I go. And then there are other days when I know that I'm going to feel less like doing those things. And so I might, schedule something very easy to do that day. And so, just and so this is what that moon class is bringing out, is how to start working slowly with the moon, and then incorporating it so that you're doing it every day eventually, but how to start out very slowly at first. So that's the class that's coming out in July. I think I'm launching it in the new moon in July, so it'll be kind of mid-July.
That sounds really interesting about the class about the moon cycles. Where we live in Cádiz in southern Spain, we're right next to the ocean, and we can tell when there's a full moon that the low tide is much lower and the high tide is much higher. So the beach, when it's low tide, we have an enormous beach, and it of course goes along with the moon cycles. So it seems like, and like you said, with women too, if it affects us similarly, then it would be interesting to learn more about how that affects us emotionally too, because it literally affects physically the earth. So why wouldn't it affect us as well, right?
Yes, and that's definitely one thing that I have learned about having how, and then learning astrology, how the planets affect you, and how those kinds of things can really be ways to, again, look at your day, look at your life, look at the path that you're on, and see what are your strengths, where are places that it's harder for you. And it's been, learning astrology has opened my eyes that way as well, and seeing, and especially working with other people and knowing their with my family, knowing their signs, and how they're affected by things that are going on, really helps me work with them and understand their personalities. And so that's been one thing that I have really learned through tarot reading and astrology, and the other paths of spirituality, is really understanding other people, and knowing when that they have days that their days that they feel better are not necessarily your days that you feel better. And so knowing that they have days that are going to be off, and knowing that is really helpful in working with other people. And so it's a good thing to know and do.
Nice. Well, as a female entrepreneur and mom and wife, what are a couple of pieces of advice that you would give to another woman who is considering starting her own business and working from home? What would you say?
Definitely have boundaries. Give your attention to your work time. Give your attention to the other things in your life, and of course, it's always going to, especially working from home, it's always going to blend. But when you can have boundaries and say, this is my work time, this is my home time, and I think especially not letting the business go into the home time. The home probably is going to go into the business no matter what, because it's just the way that it is. But having that boundary and saying, okay, this is, I'm turning it off now, and I'm going to do something else. And so that's something that has really helped me feel like I'm not letting my business take over my life. And sometimes it does, and sometimes you have things that you need to work on, or that you want to do, or projects that you want to finish, and sometimes it does. But then knowing that most of the time you're able just to say, okay, I'm done for the day, and I'm going to go and do something else, because that's when a lot of your, I think, really good ideas come, is when you're not really focused in on it, and then you can really give your brain time to rest and come up with the next good idea that you want to work on. So definitely the boundaries.
Yes, that's great. And it seems like a lot of people nowadays that have been working from home that don't normally work from home. I'm sure some of these things have probably been coming up for a lot of people, is how do I distinguish, okay, this is my work time, and then being able to turn it off mentally and say, okay, now it's time, as if I'm leaving the office and coming home, as now is my home time, and try not to think about the work or what you need to do, or emails and phone calls. It's been something kind of new for a lot of people.
Yes, it's definitely hard. And, I know a lot of people having to all of a sudden homeschool. And I thought, that is really hard because we chose to do it and I wanted to do it. And it was still hard. So I can't imagine, all of a sudden being thrust into it. And I didn't specifically work during that time because I knew that I couldn't do both. I couldn't do what all the kids needed and be fair to whoever I was working for. And so, people who are working and then all of a sudden have to homeschool and then maybe have to stay at home as well, I'm sure it's really been tough. And so I really do sympathize and tried to kind of be a resource as well and say, I've been through that, I know how it is, I can help you.
Excellent. That is great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we kind of wrap it up and I get your contact information? Is there anything else?
No, I don't think so. It just, like we've been talking about, it's definitely a very challenging time, and and opening up the way that you look at the world. I think we all can benefit from that, and it's been a very wonderful experience for me. And so if there's people that feel like that they're having difficulty with whatever is going on, personal or in the world, tarot readings and astrology readings and working with crystals, they're all things that can really help and add to your life. And so that's what I'm here for.
Most definitely. Well, what is the best way, or what are the different ways that people can get in touch with you if they're interested to learn more, if they're interested in a reading? How can they get in touch with you?
Interested in a reading and to find out more about me, I do have a website. It is 𝐤𝐲𝐻ESROKA.life. So it's �KELLYSROKA.life. And that is my website. And I'm also on Instagram at Kelly_Sroka_life. And those are the best ways to find me.
Excellent. And I'll have that information down in the show notes. And it's been great to see you after all these years. We went to junior high and high school together, and I love getting back in touch with folks, and it's just been wonderful to see you again through the internet. And hopefully we can catch up sometime in person. That would be great.
Oh, yes, that would be wonderful. Mm-hmm.
And I wish you the best with your business, with your family, and with everything. And I sure do appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been very wonderful to listen to the podcast and hear, people that I used to know and listening to their lives and seeing what they're up to. So it's been great to listen to the podcast. And so I'm very honored to be a guest, and I have really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Well, take care, and I hope to see you soon, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of the North Carolina Business Podcast. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe. And if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the little bell beside the subscribe button so you'll be notified when the next episode comes out. If you or anyone you know is a North Carolina business owner and would like to be on this podcast, please let me know by sending an email to amanda@bestlifeinspire.com. Thank you very much, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode.